it off to YouTube. And how's that working out? Okay, we got YouTube. We got Facebook go live. And then we're going to share it over at Portrait Painters. Okay, today we're going to try to we are going to try to hold on. All right. So we're live. Sorry guys, I don't know why this happens every time, but we're going to share this over to Portrait Painters, and then here we go. All right, let's take a look at our work here from a distance. If, as you can probably see, we're really choppy in the painting. It depends on how zoomed out you are, but from what you're seeing, I'll just take a look on my stream manager just to see what it's going to look like. Yeah. So at a thumbnail, Arian Del Art, what's up? Good morning. Glad you could make it. I'm doing my morning site size comparison. Here's the kind of goal for me when I say site size. It's you put the work and the painting at the same distance. So for you, you're going to see them like this if you're on mobile. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to try to turn mine sideways if I can. I can't turn it sideways in the stream manager. So if you look at the two things from this distance, basically, the eyes are super crazy. That's the first thing I see. We really need to soften those up, get the dreamy expression. The mouth is looking crazy. Now, that's just like the prime focus, meaning the head. And I'm going to save that for the end, because what I want to do is get everything else worked up to the same level. Get everything worked out to the level that it's going to be for the final piece, and then do the head. So that's our day cut out for us. We've got 3 hours. I forgot to get our time lapse going. So here's our time lapse is running, and what we'll do is so look, we see the comparison. Look at how look at the purple stripes on the lapel. Too bright, too distracting. The tie's okay. We need more highlights in there. The shirt is actually sort of the shirt is more or less okay, except for the shadow under there. Maybe I'll darken up some of that stuff. The shadow like at the midriff. So we're just scanning, flicking our eye back and forth and deciding what can be, what should we attack? So because we're not done with the background, this is our first move, is to look at the background and find out what's going on there. The background needs to be blurred focus. We've got the basic shapes in there, but look, you're seeing it from this distance. To me, this is where I want it to, on my computer, this is how, and you could probably see differences at that distance too that are notable and distracting. But let's just get into it, okay? So we'll take our eyedropper and we'll find out where and why this background is so distracting. Probably the biggest issue is some kind of a fusion here between this light and this one. So say like right here on the cusp. Let's say we get that. And then we come in here and blur that edge down. Blur that edge down. We're just trying to blur these edges. It's boring work, but it has to be done. Blur this edge down. Can you see the difference there? You're putting in an extra stroke, which should like this. You're never going to have this sharp of an edge in a soft focus background. So using your lighter brush, in this case the lighter brush, to just blur the edge back and forth. All right, here's another example. I'm going to use the lighter. Oops. See, no, we don't want to do that. We're still learning. See what happened there? That is not paint. That was background, and I didn't recognize that. Major neglect going on here. Basically, we're just squinting and finding out where is it that we maybe left things too painterly, you know, especially in our background. I think yesterday we were at this point where we were saying, let's make the background psychedelic. But now that I look at it, I'm like, let's leave that to the head. Let's try to keep this psychedelic in the background, but do it more strategically. It's too much. So we're just blurring edges. Blurring edges. Blurring responsibly. Blur responsibly. Sometimes you can get into blurring where it's like way too much. Like here, why is there this sudden bright that does not exist in nature whatsoever? But you can see that I meant well. It was good, and there were good intentions. Are you using Photoshop? Yes, I am, Ariandel. I'm basically using the one layer, and I don't know if you were on before when we talked about my tablet. Was it you that was like, wow, that's quite a machine there? But here, it's it is what it is. I believe there's a filter that blurs. Absolutely, yeah, there is. Totally. I use that a lot in my like graphic design work, and there's also a brush that blurs. But what I am doing is I'm trying to keep the process as connected with my oil painting practice. And to that end, I am like when I am oil painting, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a clean brush and just load it up with just plain medium and use that to blur the edges that are down there. Or I'll load it with plain medium and then remove that medium from the end of the brush and just use a kind of damp brush that has some of the stickiness of the medium on it. That's a whole other, but what I'm trying to go for is like the feel of dragging paint across. So like here, what I would usually do is I would mix a color that's somewhere between my gold and my red. Like where would that be? Like here, see? You find this sort of goldy orange, and then go in here with your brush and find out a way. Once you get enough oil on there, so to speak, then you can really blur that edge. You see the difference? It's like you load the brush with paint and then you sort of carve into it and make it blur with paint that's existing on the brush. And the way these digital brushes work, it's quite accurate in the sense that if you take a white brush and try to blur into an area of black, it's going to very quickly diminish the white covering power. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, it's but layers. One of the things that you inspired, was it you? I think you had inspired me to do this when you had talked about using layers previously. I don't know if you were around when I did that, but what I did was another thing about the way that I paint is very seldom do I paint alla prima, meaning most of the time, I dragged that red into but that's okay, I can bring it back. Most of the time when I paint, it's being done I don't like that. Sorry, this is an important point if you're interested in... See, with oil paint, I wouldn't be making this kind of mess. Or at least if I did, I would have to clean it up. What was I going to say? When I'm painting, typically, if I'm not painting, if I'm not painting digitally, what I would typically do is, now I've lost it. I've lost my train of thought, but I'll get it back. So see this? We're just blurring all these edges. Oh yeah, okay. Back to what Ariandel art inspired me to work on, and didn't let myself off the hook on this one as often as I could. When you are painting digitally, the paint is always wet unless you consciously decide, let's dry that layer. And that's one of the huge challenges of oil painting, is that let's say you only have 3 hours to paint. That thing's going to dry overnight. And that brings in a whole other level of understanding of drying times and the medium and all that stuff, which we could talk about when we're doing that kind of oil painting stuff, if I get us into the studio, which I hope to do. But the reason I bring it up in this context is because you can simulate that by adding a blank layer on top of this, and then your brush strokes go down as though they're impastoed. So I did that on a previous painting. Anyway, I'm yapping, but I just wanted to, if you hadn't noticed that, thank you for that. You were talking about using layers, and I was like, you know what? I really should do that, because there were areas in the eyes where if I painted in without layers, it would just mush around. And it really helped me. And I'm going to use it. I'll use it in my accent layer. But right now I'm having so much fun like learning the muscle memory of painting digitally with wet brushes that I don't feel the need to be so strict. Like there's enough to learn without introducing layers about how the brushes actually handle. So anyway, yapping away here. Let's get into this area here. So I think what we can kind of do, at least in this background section, is blur together what exists down there. We're not like here. I don't think we need to like create new colors or anything. We can just sort of generally get the tones blurred in. Like look here. And this is often what happens again when you're painting, is like there's a bit of laziness where you're like, I don't want to mix up that color. Maybe I can get away with using this brush. That's probably my pet peeve, is laziness. So if there's ever a moment when in digital I should be taking advantage of the opportunity to learn, it's the opportunity here where, essentially what I'm saying is I can see the same bad habits that I have in oil paint are the same bad habits I have here, and my oil paintings do not look dissimilar to my, like I would know my oil painting. If you showed me an oil painting of mine and a digital painting of mine, and I didn't know I did it, I would know. I could probably figure out which was which, but they look very similar, which is kind of a weird thing. I mean, you can see the pixely edges here, but for the most part, the way the edges come together and how the paint quality looks and the little mistakes that I've made, it's very similar to what I do with oil. So let's keep dragging color around. All right. Now, somebody pointed out that these are probably flowers, and I think that's correct. We're just blurring these edges. And then once we do that, I think we're going to find anyway, to your point, your original point is, why don't you just put on a blur filter there? And I think that's totally legit if you're doing an illustration and you want. But the reason I think I'm doing this stuff is to like digitize my traditional painting process as closely as I can. And then when we do get into the studio, anyone who's interested will be able to see how it's different, and then we'll come back to this digital stuff, and and there's sort of a dialogue, hopefully, between anyway, here I am holding on for dear life here, especially this yellow area. So if we zoom out again, you can already see that background starts to recede. If you leave all these sharps in here, in the background, if you leave everything sharp in that way, your eye's going to get distracted. Right now, my eye, when I look at this thing, is going to this eye on the right and this slash down the jawline. Not to mention this negligent tonal mistake of the lapel. That should be gray, or it should be darker. But anyway, my point is that what I'm trying to do is by blurring down the background here, we're going to find that our eye, your eye tends to go for sharps. So like, look at this, along the edge of the hat. My eye is like drawn there where it really shouldn't be. If I can blur that edge in relation to the eye on the right, so that your eye goes to this, when you're looking at it, you want the eye to go to this eye and like around this triangle. That's where you want the most focus, because you want to engage with the person in the portrait. So, but it's relative. I'm not going to ever get the background as soft and blurry as this background, because I'm a painter and I only have 3 hours. You know, like I'm not going to be working on this Willy Wonka one as long as I did the Keith Morrison one. That one, for whatever reason, sucked me in, and I was like, okay, let's finish this. I went crazy with it, basically. So yeah, and yes, and if you're a really good painter, if you're like a Sargent or a Velasquez or somebody like that, you start to see things that they do that are just like diabolically skilled. Like what they can do is they know that the viewer's eye is dancing around to sharps and softs. And it's almost like they've got so much practice blurring this edge and keeping this edge sharp that it creates its own language, a hierarchy of sharps and softs. And the eye just knows to jump around. The viewer knows to jump from sharp to sharp. And the painter knows the viewer is doing that. And these amazing turn of the century, 17th century painters, and some later painters, but you know, if you look at somebody like Bouguereau, you can make the argument that that there's no dancing going on there. It's all, everything's blurred to this perfection. It's not like he's improvising the sharps and softs in the way that a Velasquez is. And that's kind of like, you know, that's what I like in music too. I of course appreciate finely constructed pop music like Peter Cetera or, you know, whoever. But what really tickles me in a way is the ability of like musicians who improvise, who are like in the moment saying, well, that's that sharp and this is that soft. So what can we do to like, what can we do with what's already there? You know, it's like a musician that, oh, I played the half step too low. So let's counteract that by sliding up a fret, or, you know, on the fly, rather than somebody like a Bouguereau or like a classical musician who's really an academic. Sorry, I'm starting to digress, but I think it's important if you're interested in discussing like the kinds of painters and why I'm doing this. But the Bouguereaus out there are from this kind of academic tradition where they've figured out blurring and drawing to this point where it's almost lacks certain of the human qualities. Like they're so finely constructed and produced that it's like, it's amazing. Like look at Frederick Lord Leighton. It's spectacular, but for me, the humanity of it is somewhat lost. And that's where I look to Velázquez, and I credit my teacher with that, because I think when I started learning oil painting, I was like, whoa, Frederick Lord Leighton, like, look at that. You can't get better than that. It's like, it's not photorealism, but it's like, it's everything's so tight and perfect. But my teacher really kind of opened me up to the personality and kind of the humanity of these other 17th century painters who were turning forms strategically rather than just like everything's going to be this one degree of finish. So there's my rant for the day on academic painting. I don't hate it, but it's just, there's nothing to get you inspired in a museum. Like if you look at those Lord Leightons and the Bouguereaus from the 1800s, late 1800s, is it? And then you look at like a Sargent who's actually speaking more the improvised language of sight size and Velázquez and everybody. To me, I get much more jazzed looking at those. Whereas then you go to the Leightons and you're like, oh, okay, this is awesome. Like, I'm not going to say this is, you can't call it bad, but you can say that it doesn't get you the same way. It doesn't hit the same, so to speak. All right. So look, every edge here is basically being blurred. And that's fine because there are no sharp accents. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is here and try and exhibit this. There are no sharp accents, particularly in the background. But that's because of photography. And so you might ask, well, when you have a model in the studio, there are sharp edges everywhere. Well, yes, and therein lies this really unique point about sight size and the way that I was trained in the tradition that, you can look at Rubens, Van Dyck, Velázquez, Caravaggio to some extent, Rembrandt. What they're doing is, yes, they have a model in there. And if you look at that model's nose, that's going to be in focus. And if you look with your eyes at that model's finger, that's going to be in focus. If you look at the light switch on the back of the wall, that's going to be in focus. So the real challenge is observing the light switch on the wall out of the corner of your eye while your eye is looking at the model's eye. So you're focused on that model's eyeball and you're just looking at how that light switch on the wall, how sharp is it? Okay, you have to kind of do it. It's to experience it that way. Very different from painting from a photograph. And that's kind of, rightly so, in many ways, why my teacher would say, like, if you're looking at photos and you're painting from photos, you're not painting. That's what he said. That's what he believed. he still believes that. I like painting from photos. It's a different challenge. I won't call it a I would never call it like a illegitimate art, process, but it certainly does not require the same challenges, because everything you paint when you're painting from a photo is visible. In other words, all you have to do is look at that area and say, well, that's in focus, that's not. Yes, I could translate it the same way, and to some extent I do. I'm never going to go in and do the shirt with all of these little sparkly dots. I just am not going to do it. I'm going to leave it broad so that my eyes go to the head. It's almost like I have so much practice painting from life that my hope is to bring that into my painting practice from photos. And hopefully it feels more like a painting from life. You're never going to really do it, because everybody's going to know, well, that's from a photo. It's Gene Wilder. Like, he's not sitting for me. So anyway, you can see I'm particularly amped up, maybe because of the Mets Game 1 wild card series victory. And let's see how that works out for me tonight. Okay, zooming out, you look for your sharps. So I'm zooming this much. That's probably too much for the streaming, for the stream. So I'll zoom back in and then look at things through. All right, already better. Do you see any areas in that background that really need a softening? It's amazing how inaccurate I was with the drawing in the background. That's my pet peeve. If I'm not tracing, you can pretty much bet that I'm going to have a lot of problems with my drawing. Okay, let's use this blue just at the edge here. This looks like it needs a blur down. At some point, I'll bring in a book or a file from, like, if you look at a painting like The Forge, what's it called? The Forge of Vulcan by Diego Velázquez. Like, everybody talks about the Las Meninas, and like, it's cool, but in my opinion, The Forge of Vulcan is like one of my favorite figurative paintings I've ever seen. They're little allegorical things. It's like, it's a mythology thing. It's about, I guess, Vulcan learning from Apollo that his wife, Venus, has cheated on him. And it's amazing. But look at the rhythms of the way those paintings, that painting, the sharps and soft, and the way the eye just travels around the canvas. It's incredible. Backgrounds are hard, especially the ones that are as chaotic as this one. Totally. It's helpful that this one's in such broad focus in the photo, because then I don't have to I don't have to but still you do have to blur the edge, so it's like I don't know which is worse, like a sharp background or a soft one. But it doesn't really matter. This is the one I got, and I've got to work within it. So, speaking of which, I'm going to take this color oops. Blur all these edges. I mean, it's just going to be a blurring bonanza. And Ariandel, what are you working on these days? What's your project that you have on the easel, so to speak? Squinting down, finding a blur. Some people are so good at like doing those wiggly, wormy brushstrokes. Like a good example is like the Chuck Close, where somehow he just practiced his butt off and learned how to make hot dog shapes, like even out. It's not as easy as you'd think. I mean, yes, he's painting from a grid, but he's constantly having to step back and see if it works from a distance. So, don't just think, he's painting from a grid, like, that's easy. It's a language for sure that he invented too. I mean, I don't think people were even doing that kind of Lego painting back then. Right now, I'm trying to figure out a good pose and don't mess anatomy too much. Cool. That reminds me, somebody had dropped a link in yesterday, and I didn't end up looking at it, but was that you that dropped that? I got to go back in the chat. Okay, here we go. This is where it gets interesting. At least this is where it gets precarious. You see there's some lights in here from the shadows, and you really need to find blur the edges. It's crazy. I was thinking about it earlier and watching some of the stream and just seeing how boring at times it is to really watch what's happening here. It's, first of all, it's too small on the screen to see meaningfully the differences that I'm doing with the brush strokes. But And sort of second of all, see, look at this blurring edges. Sorry, I'm getting in the zone here because this is where it counts. See, that's interesting. There's a sharp edge there that I lost. All right, so we can go in with accents and hit that stuff again. All right. If we can do it, what I'd like to do is get our oh my gosh, look at this. Look at this eagle claw here. What is this? This is like a bird beak. That's not there. So how do we get that? I'll take my orange color from over here. By the way, we have not talked video games on this channel for a long time. Certainly haven't streamed anything. But has anyone played the new Zelda game? Is anyone going to play it? That's one that I'm not quite ready to throw down the $60 for it, but I probably will. I think I might do it for Halloween as like a gift for my son. He's really fired up to play that one. Okay, see what's happening here? I'm blurring the edges. This edge is way too sharp over here, and that's fine. Yeah, you can use a brush which is designed to blur, but I'm, again, trying to keep it classical. I don't know. All right, next thing that we have a distraction on our hands is down here. We see very clearly that our brushwork, we got to do it. You don't want to lose the vibe down here, meaning I like the brushwork that I have, but we do need to close the gap here. And this is where if you were painting in oil, you'd be like, ugh, I got to mix those colors up again. But here's an example where, that edge doesn't need to be that sharp. It doesn't need to be that soft, but, you got to find the balance. You got to make it. The point of working on that area was that it was starting to look distracting. So that's what I did. Yesterday, too, at the end of my stream, I remember I failed to do a raid. That's what I really was so eager to do when as I was getting toward the end of the session. Okay, so once again, Let's see here. It's 9:30. I'm going to take a rare break because I'd like to get my second coffee in. If I wasn't already jazzed up enough, I'm going to push it to the next level. Let's get some real paintomania happening here. Okay, here we go. It's kind of fun working on the background, right? It's relaxing. It's certainly more relaxing when I'm trying to make it look like the painting. I mean, like the photo. Like yesterday, I was trying to make it something cool, and I was like way out of my comfort zone. Like, oh, let's make it fun. No, this is not about fun. Maybe I'll bring in, on my break, I'll bring in my Velasquez book. I think I have it in the studio, darn it. All right, so how's that? You take a look at the background and let me know what, if anything, is like the most distracting. I already see stuff that's like, when I squint, I can see sharp lines that shouldn't be there. But it's getting better. And then we're going to jump in and hit the accents in the face, clean things up, the bow tie. We're on our way. I think we're going to have plenty of time. It's a Head and Shoulders after all. There's no hands, no cats, no, you know. I'll be right back. Wait, can I? Will I? I'm just going to get a... Okay. We got to do a BRB sign here somehow. BRB. Oh, that's a good... That's a good one. Huh, it's not showing up. What should we do? Huh. Come on, let's get our... What was the name of that guy that wanted to do Alex Brody? I'm bringing in a full Alex Brody here. Color overlay, black. Yeah, you're gonna love the way it looks. I guarantee it. BRB, bottom right, shadow edge. Okay, how about that? You think Alex Brody would be proud? Speaking of Alex Brody, I've got some questions for you guys. A bit in the middle of the yellow. Great. Let's look at it. Well, I was looking for my Velasquez book, and I think it's over in the studio. So no luck. But let's get back to it. So let's think about what we just discussed. So in the middle of the yellow, on the right side where there's so many sharp edges that shouldn't be there. I don't know where to begin, but you mean the big white splotch? So here was something that I thought that would be cool on this channel, and it's really more of a Alex Brody graphic design gimmick than it is anything else, but I just think it would be, and hit me up whenever yeah, a bit in the middle of the yellow. Yeah, hit me up whenever you see anything, and I'll try to work it out. So here's the concept. When there's a chat, this is what I want to have happen. I want it to overlay on the painting very big, like bold, so that it almost fills like 3/4 of the screen. And then, like, I want it to be legible even if I were doing a vertical TikTok. Okay? How can we make the chat appear bold and beautiful and designed in that way? I may regret it later, but I think for now it's something I want to do. And does anybody know what programs or whatever to do to design that? Or is it all done in OBS? Because I was just thinking back about a time when I was watching this guy do he was playing Zelda, and he just had the greatest gimmicks. If you were a new follower, it would go to a cut screen where it would tell you some historical thing about his channel, and it was just, you felt like you were part of a movie or something. And I'm not It's not that kind of channel, but I want to use fun gimmicks so that like when somebody chats, they feel like they're part of the show. Oh, interesting. Okay. Wait, I don't know if you mean you don't know if that's what I want on the channel or if this. Oh, great. Thank you.
Pop up permanently, and then you're gonna hit save, copied from Stream Elements. Then
Let's see the final.
for you to be able to utilize, so I'll put the link in the.
All
Once
right, I'll
upon a
check that
time,
out.
there
Thank you.
wasn't.
That guy's got a good yeah, cuz I I I don't want I want to know how to do it and then I'll just like design something that works for the that
I
works.
completely restarted my streaming journey from scratch at the start
Thanks for that though.
of 2023. That's right.
Whoops. Okay. So look at the hat. This area right here, it's way too bright. This is an example where the edge of the hat is, it's kind of good to have the hat be, but you don't want to have this like black line there. And yeah, let's blur it with this. Yeah, I'm getting in too close there. That's not necessary, but now I'm going to get my coffee's going to drive me over the edge and I'm going to start doing crazy stuff here. I don't want to do that. All right, here's the yellow. Blurring the yellow down. Ah, so hard to get this blurring stuff happening. But little by little. I don't like the background. I never really liked the background in the photo. But like, what are you gonna do? Uh-oh. Can't do that. I need to put my coffee over on this side. I had a portrait commission once where I photographed the subject in my studio. And then I went to his home when he was away. I got access to his living room when he was out of town. And I stood him up I had my friend put on a jacket and tie. He's about the same height as the guy. And I had my friend stand up in the living room so I could photograph the living room with an adult figure in it. And then I took the photo that I had taken of the real subject and meticulously silhouetted it out in Photoshop. And then I placed that overlaid over my guy in the living room. And then I had two photos of the living room, one with the guy in it and one without the guy. So anyway, as you can imagine, it worked. I mean, I don't love. Look, I'm not going to say much about the portrait because I never know who's watching, but I really liked the. I learned a lot on the portrait. I think the next time I probably wouldn't do it quite so. The background was very literal, and I don't think that was the right way to go. I think if I could do it again, I might have been a little more fuzzy with my background. But in this case, like there was like a clock on the mantelpiece, and like you can see what time it is and all this kind of stuff. But the whole thing was, if I can't paint the guy in his room, in his living room, I need to get a photo of that living room, but I can't just shoot any angle of the living room. I need the angle of the living room to look like it's going to fit with a person in there. So anyway, I'm very proud of myself for that was a long time ago. It's been a long time since I've done a portrait commission, actually. Probably the last one I did that was like photographed in the studio was pre-pandemic, which is crazy to think about. Not pre-pandemic, but like during the pandemic. I painted it while the pandemic was in swing. And here's my pitch: Christmas, holidays, everything right around the corner. So if you do want a drawing or a painting, I'm always open for commissions. It would be fun to do like a digital one. Get your family an NFT for Christmas or Hanukkah. All right, let's see what we got next here. So we see things are starting to blur down. And what's going to happen is, as the background blurs down, Gene Wilder sharpens up. So it's not like this is just lost work. This is very much this is all good, guys. It's all for the sake of getting it right. All right, now we're going off the rails, but that's okay. Is this the part, Arundel, you'd said right in the middle of the yellow? There's so many areas that need attention. I think it would be fun to just attack one of them based off chat, from with your help. Okay. Oh, that like main hole, the like whatever that thing is, that like blurry eyeball behind his head. All right, let's get it. Let me get this. I feel like it can be more blurred and maybe more greenish. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, like look where I have the green is actually oh, okay. It's like where the placement of the green is problematic for me. Um, all right, so here we go. We're working our way in, blurring down. Like, look at this. This is all needs to go. Blurry. Blurry. We got a big weekend ahead of us. I don't know. I'm going to Cooperstown, New York. My goodness. That's going to be exciting. Let's try this here. Blur this edge. Blur this one. Blur this one. Nope. All right, I'm with you. We got this. So it's edgy, right? Like the background is edgy, but the head is going to be much more edgy. So it's like a relative scale. Dude, I can't tell you how much I hate drawing hair. Not as much as I hate drawing. Well, yeah, more than hate. Lips are incredibly difficult for me too. So here, let's get in here at this level of zoom, and then we'll go. Like that. And then this one will push it out and over a bit. Blurry, blurry. Watch those flurries. Oh, there's a green here that we don't really have. I don't think we have the green, so I'm just going to steal it. Yeah, I'm with you on the hair thing. If you want my advice on hair, which, you know, there are people who do hair much better than I do. I tend to just break it down into darks and lights, and that's easier said than done, for sure. But you see your darkest darks, like I already have it here when I'm painting. I hate drawing hair. I'm drawing and erasing it for the past 15 minutes. You've been drawing and erasing it. Yeah, for 15 minutes. No, you got it. And yeah, like, I don't know what you're drawing from. If you're making it up, then good luck to you. I can't make things up myself, so wait a minute. Let's see here. Let's find out why this part of the hat. But are you drawing from imagination? Are you coming up with that pose is it from memory essentially, or are you using a reference of some kind? Yeah, I mostly make it up. I use references from muscle figurines. Wow. Interesting. See, I would love to watch how that process unfolds because I cannot for the life of me make up somebody from my imagination. I could do a head. Like you could see that I do some like heads, mostly because I have a lot of practice painting heads. You could see that I will occasionally draw like an imaginary head. But I would love to watch that process and what you mean. Like, how do you use the reference photo? How do you use a reference of a figurine if you're not copying it precisely? All right, here's my... I don't want to leave the background like this because I know what's going to happen. I'm never going to go back to it, but I'm ready to move on. I hope everyone else is. It is 10 o'clock. We've been streaming for an hour and 15 minutes. We've got a few things, more than a few things to work on. So I'm zoomed all the way out here. I'm going to just... Look, this is fun and everything to have this kind of blurry... But we really need to blur the edge properly there. Okay, so you gotta... Nice. Oh, so you have like a model that you use, that you have on your desk and then draw that? That's awesome. I'd love to see what the... Oh, and the references. Wow. Oh, so you're like... That's really interesting. So you're an anatomist, like you know the anatomy. I don't know that stuff. That's awesome, though. I wish there's a lot to... Wow. Really cool. Yeah, that's like beyond what I know how to do at all. Like, I, I don't even know what I know how to do, but it's like, that's a very functional... Like, you can use that to make stuff, you know? Like, that's really cool. You can make up your own thing. All right, let's see here. I see. So you're trying to drape the hair over the top there. Yeah, you're talking about how the hair falls. Really interesting. Yeah, could get me into a conversation about life drawing and how important that is, and how drawing really does differ from painting in some senses. If you're drawing, like I rant and rave about how when people say they know how to draw, but they don't know how to paint. I can't draw like that. I've never practiced it. I wish I had, and I probably should. But the way you learn how to do that is obviously by painting the live model. And, how do you do that? I guess you can paint from photos of the nude, but more importantly, I think you gotta get out there and find the life drawing classes. Which I don't know, at least in New York, I don't know if anybody would be interested in doing a life drawing class, but I used to run them, and I'm thinking about doing it again. All right, take a look at this. That reminds me, there was a guy. I was going to tell a story, but I'm not going to tell it right now because you kind of have to know who these characters are. There's a painter named Odd Nerdrum who is he Swedish or Norwegian? He's Norwegian. And he is a bit of an eccentric, to say the least. He was being chased down by the Norwegian government for tax evasion. Gosh, I feel like I'm going to get lost here. And he used to run this like eccentric art school where he would have people living there and like sort of being like his like servant, but also in exchange they would get painting instruction. And recipe for disaster, especially when you're not paying taxes. Chances are you're not paying your staff. So what happened? He would have these like group discussions, evidently, where everybody would get to select a painting, and they would talk about it over wine and cheese, And there was a guy that came to my art painting class. My figure drawing class, and he was telling me this story wherein Odd Nerdrum came around the room and was like, okay, like, and, John, what is your painting? And like, the guy's like, oh, I choose this one. I chose this one. And Odd sort of pauses, and then he says, that is a stupid painting. And like, okay, sorry I asked, or sorry you asked. But I just remember that story and just feeling bad for the guy. But I guess if you get yourself into that situation with an eccentric, reclusive, tax evading, crazy painter, what do you expect, huh? This is a stupid painting. And there's another story about the same artist. This guy was like, part of his duties for another guy, this other student of his, part of his duties as an assistant was to like watch his properties. Like he owns like property in France or something like that. And he had to like be the caretaker for the property. So much like The Shining. It's like you can't make this stuff up. Let's get into the bow tie while we're at this. So he goes, he's there in this like palatial French villa. And at one point he has to go down into the basement because it's the best ghost story I've ever heard. But I'll never do it justice. But basically he and his wife at the time were watching this house. And they're on a rocking chair. One of them's on a rocking chair, and like there's this loud bang, and the chair moves across the room. Okay, like not across the room, but the chair this friend of mine is sitting on is thrown several inches off of where it had been. So like, all right, and it's nighttime, and like they're like, what was that? Like, oh my gosh, maybe it was something like, maybe it was like an explosion in the boiler room or like in the basement. Like, should we go check it out? So of course they go into the basement and they go down there, and what they see is a crib, like an 19th century, like rusted out, like baby's crib down there. And they're just like horrified. So they're like, all right, we're gonna. And then another time they were, they had this giant mirror up in a studio, and the thing got, they just heard like a smashing sound, and they went in there, and like a mirror that was like affixed to an easel had come off the easel and just shattered on the ground. And it was like, you know, the way it was secured, there was just no way that would happen without supernatural influence. So look, I'm just retelling this story. I'm not trying to sell this as truth, but you know, this is the kind of thing that happens with Ad Nerdrum. And then another time, I forget the build up to this, but essentially this, like, a boy appeared at their front door wearing like 1940s garb. And so like, and they had been told like, oh, there's a ghost of a boy who is, you know, yeah, he's from the like World War II, you know, from the World War, like, and he's friendly. You know, there's nothing to be afraid of. And so sure enough, like this boy comes to the front door, and that's not like the story itself was so scary, but the punchline of that one with this crazy artist was that the artist shows up like, oh, how's it going, Richard? You know, thank you for helping and everything with the house. How is your stay? And they're like, oh, it's been fine, but there was like a boy that came to the door, and like when we opened the door, like, you know, whatever. It was just like a classic ghost story type thing where they open the door and then he's like not there, or they saw him through the window, but he never showed up at the door, something like that. Wearing like the little 1940s getup. And he goes, yeah, this little child dressed up in like, you know, military gear shows up to the door, and Ad Nerdrum just says, oh, that's wonderful. And it's like, oh, really? But I guess, you know, I love that line. And the guy who tells the story is so good at it. Oh, this is wonderful. He visited you. He came. You know, and they're meanwhile traumatized for life. So anyway, good to look up Ad Nerdrum. If you're looking for hit singles of his, there's one where there's somebody, it's like I'm going to try and keep it family friendly, but let's just suffice it to say that there are controversial paintings by Ad Nerdrum which are worth looking at. There's one of a person in the woods, which I think if you just Google that, like controversial Ad Nerdrum painting of woman in the woods, it's out there. But it is, I think it's interesting, at least from the perspective of like this crazy guy who's doing this kind of, bohemian stuff you wouldn't expect in today's culture. All right. How are we going to do this now? How are we going to come back from the Odd Nerdrum ghost story? Oh, Ariandel, you wouldn't say you know it, you're learning it. Wow. No, that's great. Yeah. It's like learning how a dish, it's like learning how to cook a dish so you can cook or create something new with the same process. Yes. Interesting. So you're learning how to draw, but how do you learn anatomy to begin with? Meaning, I can copy that book, but I can't then take the pieces of what I've learned and put them in a different context. I don't know. What's the first step in learning how to break free from the mold, so to speak, of the anatomy book and start twisting and turning it? If you don't have a model, how are you doing it? That's where I have trouble bridging that gap. You know what I don't want to do today? I don't want to rush this thing. And I know I'm going to, but I have to kind of decide now. Is there any way I can finish this thing? I don't think so. I think, the thing is I could, but it's never going to have quite the same as I imagined it might. So, I don't know. There's lots of stuff to do today, too. And I'm not going to be able to do it tomorrow. There's a book of anatomy of a Chinese artist I wish I could afford. There's everything explained with art, so you don't really have to understand Chinese. Okay, boxes and basic shapes. Oh. Okay. So you create like boxes. It reminds me a little bit of this book by Stan Lee, who's the comic book artist. Basically tells you how to block things out with like what are they? Squares, like boxes in 3D space. That sounds cool. But like the anatomy looks so realistic in that. Like I don't see much that looks like, oh, that doesn't translate, like everything works in your painting, in your drawing, which is really hard to graft the muscles onto something and do the foreshortening without a visual cue. So I admire that. That's the kind of drawing stuff I can't do yet, but maybe I should learn it. Okay, let's stay on target here. I think it's going to be okay if I don't finish up today. I think the 3-day oil sketch is what I'm striving toward, like a 3-day Head and Shoulders. If this didn't have a crazy background, I probably would have finished it up by now. But one day I think I'll get a 3-day sketch going. And part of this, you know, it's like anything else when you're thinking about the finish before you've even solved your main problems, then that's a problem. This is the video of the book's content. Wow. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, again, it gets back to learning anatomy and learning. This opens up a discussion, at least from my perspective, about what I learned and what I failed to learn so far. The way that I was taught was, of course, go to life drawing every Thursday or whenever it was. But I never did. And one of the reasons that I didn't was because there was so much to do at the easel with the model. But when you're doing a 2-week or a 4-week figure pose, when you have the model standing there in the same pose for 3 hours a day for 4 weeks, like that's the traditional sort of atelier approach that I took, at least that my teacher had us doing. And then once a week there was life drawing, and it was kind of an afterthought for me. Because I preferred being in the studio with the big setup, and she's not going to move anywhere, and you know, it's just like easier to control. But that's the whole thing about life drawing, is it's not easy to control, and it sharpens your skills for when things move. You can, you know, anatomy like the back of your hand. So I'm working on the head right now when I shouldn't. I should finish this darn. Like, look at how chill his eyes are in the photo versus. This is usually how you start your drawings. Yes, okay, great. Yeah. You know, it's so interesting. I wish I could discuss in more detail. I can't right now, but there are things about what you're showing me that open up a discussion that I'd like to have, that is about, you know, it's about me, because it's always about me, but it is about, like, the difference between what can happen if you only follow one approach to drawing and painting. I'm like an example of somebody who is a classical painter and is stuck. I'm stuck. Like, I learned this method when I was 18. I haven't done anything different really since then, because I believed so wholeheartedly in what my teacher, in how I interpreted what my teacher was teaching me. And when I see things like that, I'm like, oh, like that takes as much practice as what I'm doing right here. Like, this took tons of practice, but so did what you're showing me. Like, to be able to, that's a practice. Like, you have to know how to do it, and you have to do it over and over and over again, and then it becomes second nature. And probably the reason the hair is so hard is because every kind of hair is different, right? It's like, it's not, you don't have like the skill set built up for in the same way that you do pectoral muscles. It's like every kind of hair is different. So anyway, I somewhat fell into the trap of ease of use where, for me, it was like, let's keep it easy. Do what you do best and leave it at that. And that's not a recipe for growth. Let's put it that way. Here's my approach to hair. You're drawing in a structural way, and that's what I don't know how to do. But what I do know how to do is draw in terms of mass. So I'm just looking at these highlights and I'm kind of plopping them in from the perspective of I'm imagining the forms not as structural forms, but more as tonal values, you see? It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both, but I always come down more on the side of structural, on value range than I do. And so to that end, I suffer, like that part of my practice suffers. So you get that difference is like, is it light or is it dark? And what's the X and Y coordinate and what's the value? I mean, essentially it's like playing a game of Battleship. Is it darkest dark, lightest light, or somewhere in between? And is it at this X coordinate or this Y coordinate? And you put it down, it's wrong, and then you stand back from the work and you essentially make 1,000 errors until you're done making them, you're done with your 1,000 errors, and then you look at it and you say, okay, that's close enough. Now, what you're doing is you're seeing the form of this bow tie in three-dimensional space, and you're using your pencil to carve around the edges and build a sculpture. I'm sort of doing that, but I'm much more of a mass. I paint in mass than I ever will paint in those forms. In fact, I went to visit my old school the last time I was in Italy, which was probably 5-6 years ago. And I went to visit that school, and a fellow who now works at a school there told me, I was complaining about this. I was like, I can't seem to draw. Like, I'm so stuck in my mass thing and blurring my edges down. And I don't have the structural weight that a lot of artists that I admire have. And he said, well, take a ballpoint pen and do life drawing with a ballpoint pen. Or, and so that way you can't really sit there doing hatching. I mean, you can, but not the same way you would with a pencil. Basically the exercise is do a life drawing, but don't shade anything. Just see what happens if you're not allowed to use tonal range. Then you have to use line to show the form turning. So that's where you almost have to put on a different set of goggles to do that from what I would normally do. You're putting on another lens and you're looking at it, you're saying, and I'll show you the kinds of drawings that I did. I have them in a notebook. Again, I think they're at the studio. But there's some of my favorite drawings to look at because it's true. If you just use your eye, you're using a different part of your brain. You're thinking about things in 3D space, and your brain has to shift gears. If you're somebody like me who is particularly skilled at this other approach, which I'm demonstrating here, it's like you find, I'm trying to show you, like, I'm not trying to show you, but the way I'm painting is in terms of light and shade, really primarily. Yes, I'll throw in a dark. I'll throw in a, what do you call it? Like, I'll throw in a line here and there, but for the most part, I'm just filling in XY coordinates. I don't know how else to put that, but okay, so like, so much so that I'm afraid to leave a line like this. Like, see this line? It's probably in the right place, but I'm terrified to leave it that sharp because it doesn't turn. It's like, that's not the correct value there. It doesn't just go from light to dark. I need to mix up a middle value. So what will I do? I'll take my light, my dark, and my light, and I'll find a middle value, and then I'll blur that edge down like that, and like, okay, good enough. But then you lose the sort of punch of those drawing marks. And the key for me will be to draw with paint and not blur the edge down and get it right with the color value and the direction of the line. That's the kind of like bringing together of these two ways of looking at form and marrying them into a kind of that's what Velasquez does, basically. That's what Van Dyke does. He may, he has different periods, but, where he does that more than others. And then there are times where it turns into a formula for him. But we all suffer from that. Okay. Let's say goodbye to this bow tie. What do you think? But thank you for sharing those drawings. And I encourage anyone who's watching to, if you're in Twitch or have access to the link, take a look at those books, and particularly the Imgur links, because you'll see that we're talking about a very related language of painting from life, basically. But yeah, like, I still don't quite know how you're layering those. I mean, that's the magic for me, is seeing how you're taking those box forms and then beginning to overlay musculature onto that armature. It's that's where I need to go. That's why I need to, like, bring my sketchbook on family vacations and just draw stuff. Like, that's where that Inktober thing of drawing a backpack, drawing a passport, that's where that can really help you, because you have to use, your drawing first of all. Anyway, it's exciting. I'm inspired by that. I just don't know whenever I get my sketchbook out at a family vacation, I start drawing my feet or like my right hand. I think it's memorizing shapes of certain parts of the body and placing them like Legos. I can't really describe it. I know that's what it is, but that's a really great description of it. But here's from the perspective of this guy. I would ask you, okay, but when this arm does this, that Lego piece changes shape. And then when you turn it in space like this, that Lego piece gets truncated with foreshortening. So you're dealing with the anatomy changing while it's changing, so that's where it looks more like witchcraft to me, like I'm like, how are you following that stuff? I can't get my head around it entirely. But yeah, keep it rolling, because I'd like to learn more. It would be great if those Lego pieces stayed all the same shape, It's you. That's where you really have to use your imagination. It's like, what would that Lego piece do if it were truncated? And if it were turned at this angle? You're using imagination in a way that, when I say I don't have an imagination, I mean it. It's like I work from what is right in front of me, and I can't. It's not that I can't. I just never. I rely on it so much that I've almost burned those pathways as the only pathways. And when I start going into the other thing, I'm like a fish out of water. Okay, here we go. But very cool. Thank you for chiming in with all that. All the reference links and the insights. And then we're just, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm like sort of done with the bow tie, but I'm blurring these edges down. So look here. And by the way, I think I should ask this. How much of a worldwide event is this Wonka movie, Arundel? In Poland, are you subjected to this film? And if so, like when and like what era was it that you had seen it? Or is it just like not something that's part of the culture the way it is in the US? I'm just curious about that from the perspective of I'm assuming you know Gene Wilder, but is everybody as obsessed with this film in Poland? Like, I remember Mr. Rogers was just like a non-entity, and I knew that. He's an unknown quantity in Europe. I'd known that, but I'm curious more about this Wonka. You don't really watch movies, but people were talking about it. Okay, I think it's people were talking about it, meaning maybe they're talking about the new one that just came out, because there's a reboot. There are multiple reboots. But yeah, fair enough. So this is an image like this guy's face you're familiar with. All right, let's see. All right, now we're going to get in here and start doing the hardest part. Got it. All right, the hardest part for me is the mouth. So, yes, we don't have to steal from this corner of the reference photo, but yes, we're going to. Oh boy. This is going to turn into talk about a world of imagination. I'm not going to zoom out the way you just saw me try to avoid zooming. I want to try to keep this zoom free, this stream. At least keep it at this level, because the more I zoom in, I don't know. I don't know why I have these rules, but I think it just helps me. It pushes me to a limit, to an edge where I'm not usually going to go. It's easier for me to zoom in and stop looking at the reference photo. So I think it's like I'm letting myself off the hook. Okay. Now, things are going to get tricky here. You see, all I'm doing is, at this stage, filling in, basically blurring what's already down there. And if it's not down there, I put it in. Okay. Why am I stealing this color? Because I'm lazy. You see these edges, like if you're oil painting, you're constantly having to mix in more and more color to allow for those transitions to ring true. Like, look, here's our darkest dark that we don't have. I kind of like not having a dark accent in there, so maybe we'll leave that like that for now and then hit it. Oh, Zeldavania, what's happening? We've had a spirited discussion. And thank you. I'm now rounding third base here. Maybe not going to finish it today. I don't want to rush it, but I might have to keep a little bit of a longer session. That was too sharp. All right, so yeah, we'll zoom out. We did the background, or we tried to do the background. But yeah, I think this is the last sequence in the time lapse, meaning the head and the bow tie are the last thing I'm really going to address, so that when you see the final time lapse, you're going to see oh boy. Drawing like this. I'm left-handed, so like, I don't know, I'm pulling stuff the wrong direction. I certainly blurred that edge into oblivion. But yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And we are moving forward. Now, one thing that I dare not do, even though it needs to be done, I don't want to do it. It's too scary. How long do these usually take, and how long are the time lapses? An average would be like 16 hours. Sometimes, so it's like, let's say I do 4 3-hour sessions, 3, 6, 9, 12, and then throw in another one if I need it, if it's like a complex composition. And then the time lapses, I try to bring them down to 12 seconds because people lose interest quick when they're like, okay, I get it, like that's why the time lapses where I'm zooming around, like if you look at the Mr. Rogers one, I went to, I jumped around and I feel like that was effective, the whole thing in editing video today, which is where you have to like jump from scene to scene quickly, or else people are like, boring. Same thing happens to me. So I try to look at it through that lens. But it's hard too, because sometimes I'm like, I want my video to be longer. Like I want people to watch the video. So I try to push to see how long I can make the time lapse without losing people's attention span. So anyway, long answer to a simple question. Let's say 16 hours brought down to 12 seconds. I did one for Bob Ross, and that was somewhat longer. But I think I suffered as a result. I think the time lapse suffered as a result because it's like a little too long. Yeah, I found there are two reasons for that. One is I'm not editing the time lapse. Like, I could probably get away with it by skipping elements. Plus, because you don't see a paintbrush, people get bored much more quickly. They're just like, what is this? It's like, it's just like a painting happening in a vacuum. It looks, it's not as relatable when you don't see the paintbrush. But yeah, 12 seconds is also a function of the like attention span on these platforms. Like if you're watching a YouTube short, good for TikTok. Exactly. And that's like, you can see I did one that was 10 minutes on my YouTube channel. I have that up there. I think I left it 10 minutes for the one of the ones that I was most proud of, really. And there's no views on that. Nobody cares. No, but like, you're just like, okay. It's a different audience. Like essentially, I really hope that people are interested in the long form, because that's where the fun happens. But the short form time lapses are really like an advertisement. They're like the gateway drug, like, okay, if you like this enough, you might want to stop by and see the long form thing. Now, yeah. So, but I also think it would be cool to be doing. Hang on, this part's pretty dicey here. Because see how you're going from shadow to light here? You have to make sure you do that delicately. I'm going to take it to that end. Look, there's a highlight that lives right in here. Gosh, this is tricky business here. You don't want to like hammer this stuff home, but it's there, and you don't want to go too far with it. What else do we have? Okay, look at the. I'm going to grab this brown. What was I just saying there? I lost it because now the pressure's on. Anyway, the time lapses are for the TikTok attention span. It's all about that, because I figure what I really need to do is experiment with in between. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to mute this sneeze in time. Nope. I need to experiment with an in-between. So like one thing that I'd like to do for sort of a longer form video is maybe a 3-minute video that shows some of the highlights from our stream, such as they are. Like, like I feel like there's some funny things that happen with, like, Bob Ross would be a great one. Like when we were talking about Bob's there's just some like funny highlights where I would take the chat, and that's probably another reason why I want to have the chat overlay dialed in, so that I don't have to edit that into my videos. I want it to be visible. And then I could imagine a kind of highlight reel that shows bits of the time lapse, but also shows bits of the process. And that can actually, funnily enough, lead to more, attention span. So like, because it's going to change from real life, so to speak. Anyway, you didn't ask about that, but this is just kind of like what I have on the, sort of on my brain, and that's what I kind of want to move it toward, if I ever have time to do that. So look, this is hard stuff. You're trying to make sure that you hang on, I have to really be careful. You're softening. Anyway, I'm going to grab a pink from the, see this nice red? That lives here and comes back around, and then inside there's a lighter pink, almost a highlight. And since we have no canvas there, that's gonna show up. And this one can be blurred this away. Those, yeah, here we go. Look at the highlight here. We'll pull a highlight from here. Can you see what happened there? Who was it that I credit you, Zeldavania, almost entirely with perhaps accidentally encouraging me to. You see what's happened over time? I've moved away from my addiction to stealing colors from the photo. And I know, again, that wasn't your intention, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't. I want to make sure I'm using my muscles and not letting them atrophy, because essentially when I get back to the studio, the painting studio, there's going to be hell to pay if I don't. It's going to be brutal. I think you guys will see how out of practice I am at painting in real life. But I'm going to use some crutches in there too to get me therapeutically ready to do it. All right. Here's our I think another thing that changed recently was I started pushing on the gas for myself and saying, we got to do these in 3 days. Like what, and that's not a healthy approach. I think, there I go. I think in some ways it's a good idea to let yourself have deadlines, but in other ways, you can see in my Ripley one, that's a moment that I don't know how I feel about it. When I look at it to this day, or several days later, oh God, look what I did. Hang on. I'm going to steal something from here. Come with me, and you'll be. When I look at it now, I see choppiness happening in there that's like, you didn't even paint that. You didn't even go in and fill in the canvas there, which was part of what we were talking about. Was like, that's cool, like it looks stylized and interesting. But I look at it now and I think, you can't take that easy way out. You got to make it look stylized and interesting, but do the work. And so that's part of what I think, again, I'm always learning something when I'm doing this stream. It's like I want it done so I can do the time lapse, so I can get the likes on the TikToks. But it's not what it's all about, right? Okay. Looking good. Now, if I zoom out and I look at our time lapse, look at how crazy the eyes are. The whites of the eyes are like insano right now. I'm kind of going to let myself off the hook with the rest. And then so we have 1 hour. Here I am saying I'm not going to rush, but I'm rushing. His eyes looked more bigger yesterday. Now they look more equal. Yes, the one on the left was too far open. Look at. I just trimmed down ever so slightly. It's really tricky because they're also at an angle. Yeah, no problem. Not more big, more bigger, more large. No, they were too open, and they are still too open. But why is that, and where is it? And it's like that's the real crux when you start getting into the horrors of getting it right. I mean, it's a battle. I could also get in here and start hitting dark accents, but I don't necessarily want to do that right now. In part because look what happens when I do that. It blurs in with what's underneath, and then you run into a whole problem. Let's see. Bring this down. Now we're just sort of blurring edges for the sake of it. There's one minor detail that bothers me, but might not be anything. Please hit me up. What do you got? I don't know if I'm gonna be happy to hear it right now. No, I am. But it's always, it's like one more thing to the shopping list here. Tell me, go for it. because I don't want to just get away with it. I want it to look right. The top edge of the hat seems flatter than it should be. Okay, let's zoom out. Are you talking about the very top of the head? The very top of the hat? Okay, so look at look at this, right? What? Yes, the top of the top hat. Okay, I'm totally with you. I don't know where it starts and where it ends, but one thing that I think needs to be addressed is, let's make this less kooky somewhat. That doesn't need to be so kooky as it comes down there. It's just got to be a straight line, right? And then we can blur this edge over. And then blur this edge in and over. This edge. I was definitely going to have to go back here. So thank you for pointing that out as something that's reading annoying. Let's bring this whole light edge over. Bring it through. Another part of the issue is the way that I've blurred this edge. Like, we need to have some of that dark feeding across here. See, I'm just sort of going to scatter it in lazily here because this stuff feeds across, and I didn't do my due diligence on it at all. But basically, you need to blur the texture of the hat from the right into the texture on the left. So now, maybe I'm seeing too much. No, you're not. There's another issue. Look, if you were playing a Spot the Difference, I would immediately say this is a great example of where having your background queued up is huge. Look at the difference between just shaving the top of this bitty flower that sits over the top of this. Now you do that, now you got to get into this too, but that's a little less precarious, so I'm happy to do that. Now tell me if, when I zoom out, if by knocking that down a little bit, it does well. And look, the edge is too sharp, because what's happening essentially is this edge is so sharp that your eye is going to the top of the hat, and you're like, what's up with that hat? Like, why is it jumping out there? And the answer is, this edge is too sharp, and it's making this little flower or whatever it is it's making my eye go there in a way that is distracting. So see, by blurring that edge, and now that it's blurred, we need to blur the edge on the right here too. I'm going to put this down, and then you're going to say, it doesn't look much different. But so maybe I'm seeing, so yeah, even now you can see, let's pull some of that across and over. It's a subtle difference, but one that it can make or break. I've definitely noticed that, and I was like, when am I going to deal with that? Another thing is the hat itself is just too flat. Like, I never, again, like I say, did due diligence on my middle values on the hat. So, like, let's take a look. Where are the, again, like I was saying, where along this edge do things, if I squint, I have this river of light coming down the hat, but if I squint my eyes down and try to blur my focus, there's actually halftone going from here into here. There's sort of, you imagine the light bleeding through, or the lack of light bleeds from this edge of the hat, this half of the hat, over to here. And by doing that, we're going to make the hat look more round, and it should, it should do what we're talking about. But huge, that's a huge piece of the puzzle. Another thing I don't want to do, I'm going to grab this greeny, it's hard to explain, but there's sort of a greeny value there that's here, let's get in here and do it from this distance. So here, very subtle, but worth observing properly. Because I mean, who's Wonka without his hat? We can't just say, oh yeah, there's a hat there. Look, nothing to see here but a giant maroon top hat. So you're blurring these edges around. You're trying to get the felt nature of it. And this is a little bit where Ariandel, we were talking about my inability to make things up. You have to, it's a two-way street. The language applies in both directions. If you don't have the texture, if you don't have the tonal range, you're going to run into trouble just as much as if you don't have the values, the structural stuff. So here, let's get this. Now, top of hat is another thing that we might need an accent for, but while we're here, this is one of these subtle things that people might not see entirely. But if I get all the way in here and steal the lightest value of the top of the hat, and then use that, oh shoot, here, wait, let's use that. Not gonna work. I need an accent layer. Oh boy, I don't like that. Here, we're gonna use this accent layer. By hitting this, hang on, I see. Yeah, I'm getting into the detail there because the top of the head, I mean, I've gone obsessed, but you were so right. The hat is not, the way the hat connects with the background was never attended to. And by having that distinction between hat and background properly delineated, you're letting the eye off the hook. The eye knows like there should be a line there. So anyway, I might be getting too detailed, but already you're seeing things are coming down a bit more. Probably the hat, if I just keep staring at it, and we're all going to go crazy. But there's another area of light right here. Like, look, I'm going to keep pulling from my highlight on the hat over on this side and blur from here. So look, see this little accent? Just a chop away, a choppity chop at that accent there. So yeah, you'd think like this is too crazy. You're going, this is the highway to the danger zone, and it is. But there are things to be found here and things to be resolved. So top of hat, another thing that you may find is look at my shadow edge here. This is where you can't really get away. You can't get away with anything. Find out how does this curve and curl down. All right. And I'm getting hurried here because I'm sort of like, oh, I wanted to finish this thing, but I can't think in that mindset. Look at this light is too light. It's another example where if you don't have your values, what's it called? If you don't address the value range, oh God, look at this. This is going to be fun. Let's get in here. If you don't address the value range, anyway, you got me. You got me. The emperor has no hat here. That's why I appreciate. I've said this before. Like when you're learning how to paint, you constantly have teachers and colleagues coming in and being like, "Give me a critique." Like, and I open myself up to that, and I say, "Give me a critique." And there is no doubt that there's resistance, and the reason that you resist a critique, like, not that I'm resisting, I'm going in there and solving the hat. But part of me is like, it's not as bad as I thought. Like I can fix this in 3 strokes. Like Zeldovania is right, but I can solve this one in a few strokes and get back to what I really want to be working on. So, but you don't get that when you're on your own, and that's why truly the most valuable thing about this stream for me is being redirected and saying, I don't know if this is just me, but are you seeing this too? And when I hear that, I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to have time for that. But then when I do, it's like, okay. So if you sense the resistance, it's because that's the way it is. Arundel, have a great rest of your night, and thank you for hanging. Good luck with those figure drawings, and thanks for sharing all that stuff. That's a huge help. Ooh. All right. You too, buddy. All right. Now, all right. So now our top hat is now look at how crazy the top hat looks on the left. It's like I don't know what it is. Whoop. Not supposed to be like that. So, knowing that, what is it supposed to be like? I think this, let's get in here, grab this. It's crazy how much you're going to not see this in the time lapse. Not that, again, it's not just for the time lapse that we're doing this, but we're just doing this for the time lapse. The time lapse is God. There's our darks. You know, we're really having to reevaluate the hat, and I think so important. We're blending, blurring. Now, how about the another thing that's making the hat fall flat? Oh boy, I don't know if I like this. Let's get in here. You can't be scared to muck stuff up. I think when I do go back into the studio, I'm going to be like much more confident. So I'll be like, look, I changed this in my digital. Like, do it in oil. Don't be a wimp about it. Just, I would have changed this if it was oil. So, come with me. Now, what we also don't want to run into the trap of a portrait of a hat. That can definitely happen. You look at some of the old masters, and like, there's a great Titian painting. I think it's Titian. Maybe it's one of the contemporaries, but it's like this beautiful blue jacket on the guy, and it's like, is that about the guy or is it about the folds in the jacket? All right, anybody got another thing we can let ourselves off the hook with the hat? Let's get back into the head, how about? Well, no, we can't. Sorry. We gotta let this, see this little fine detail here in the hat there? You're not gonna go too crazy with it, but you do need to put the highlight in. We can grab one of these from the head. Mm-hmm. All right, what's happening now? We get to this point where blurring edges, and you'll be in a world. Pure imagination. This is not a world of pure imagination. This is anything but. This is adherence, strict adherence to the photography. And look, another thing that makes the hat flat is this. The blurred edge over here. And were you asking, Vania, about the, I think you were asking about if certain textures are harder to paint. Like, does the velvet change your technique? And it does, only in that you have to observe it with a different lens. So like, I might have left this edge sharp there, and if you leave the like, I don't know, you have to like do a side by side for you to really, for what I'm saying to really make sense. But look at a side by side of, like, look, this edge of the hat turns very nicely because it's smooth, but this edge of the hat is dappled with felt, this area of the hat. So your edges are necessarily, like, look, see how there's that darkest dark, and then bring this darkest dark over here. You gotta, yeah. Scary stuff. Fun but scary, right? See, I don't know if I explained that more than I did just demonstrate it. But so here, let's get in here. Close off this stuff. Now, we're going to dive back into the belly of the beast here. The belly of the beast being the baby blues here. There's no, the siren song of Wonka's blue eyes here. Let's get in here and just do this with a small brush. Nope, I blurred it. Dun, 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 dun. No, come on. All right, team, let's get in and really grab our dark. Are we dizzy yet? We really have to make amends there, softening the eyes, bringing across our this nice color under the eye here. Now wait a minute, we're not off the hook yet. You know, what happened here? More blue. More blue. Vania. All right, listen. Here's what I think about the eyes. Hang on. Let me get the structure of the outside. And I don't want my reaction to deter you. I'm really just kidding, because I know you're right that the eye on the right, look what's happening. There's a dark in there, but there's also this beautiful light, okay? Which is, if you were to place it Now, I can't place it without using another layer. Let's just put in another layer for argument's sake. So we'll put in a new layer, and then we'll lock this one, and we'll draw on. Sorry, making very sure that we've, just for sort of experimental purposes, we're going to find our lightest light within the eye. So it's like that, right? That's that greeny. And then my hypothesis is that, say, it's lighter than the gray. Did you catch that? Like, the gray that I have down there is kind of the backbone color. Now, I placed that in the wrong spot, but you get the idea. We can pop that over the top and really start to see the baby blues coming in. And this is sort of the fun part that I want to like hit at the end. You want the time lapse to end with a kind of twinkle in the eye sort of thing, but I just wanted to show that in my last movements here, I'm figuring out the architecture of the eye, of the eyes, I should say, so that the sharp edges don't, basically the gray of the canvas. I'm filling in the gray of the canvas as best I can in these last bits and hoping that I don't do anything too monstrously inaccurate. Because sometimes leaving things in, oh shoot, did you see what happened? This is going to be one for the ages. I'm going to merge these layers because now that's all wet paint. Okay, like before it was wet on dry when it was a new layer. So anyway, that's this kind of using the medium in a way more like oil paint, but it's like oil paint on steroids because you can just say be dry or be wet, and it's like, it's unfair because with oil paint, you have to wait a day for it to dry. And sometimes then it doesn't even dry. All right, let's blur this edge, too dark. Blur this edge. Pull that across. And then let's find our highlight here. So many times we're challenged or tasked with finding what's called scumbling. This is called scumbling when you're taking a lighter opaque value and dragging it over the top of a darker translucent value. And depending on the surface and the medium that you're using, it's a beautiful kind of, the way a transparent color can sit over another one. You're never going to see that in digital paint because it's just an approximation. But in oil paint, you really will find those beautiful you will see the translucency of the paint. But you're not going to see it so much in digital paint because the light doesn't bounce through. In oil paint, the light bounces through the layers of paint and causes these kind of like mysterious glowing quality, which is not unlike the way flesh is in real life. And that's kind of what I like to think I learned when I was at art school, was like the power of oil paint as as a way of almost recreating flesh. There's a reason why crazy oil painters become like God, have God complex, because they're like, oh, at least my teacher was a lot like that. Like, usually in reference to the old masters, like what they were doing was taking paint and showing that back to God, essentially, and saying like, look, I can do what you've done here. And it's like, I'm not claiming to be that, but I've had experiences like that, particularly with oil paint, where you're like, you start to lose a little bit of the separation between you and the subject. You start to lose that boundary, and it can be intoxicating, let's say. Okay. No, that was a highlight that I didn't need. Here, let's get this. I need this red. And then I'm going to get in here with my 000 brush, my smallest brush. All right, did I lose us yet? Yep, we're down to the wire here. Everyone's like, I think we're gonna, maybe Chris is off his old meds again. All right, let's see. Okay. Now the pink here, but this really is the part for me where it becomes less about, you can really get lost here, let's put it that way. And it's good, but it's like, it's dangerous, you're like, look at the eye on the right. Is that better? No, I don't quite have it turning. And I think part of that is the blurring edge here. Blurring that eye lid, and then blurring this one down across as well. Bringing this through here. I'm not going to let myself get away with that. Okay. Now, what are we going to do next? Eyes. We'll keep going with the eyes. Let's blur across these edges. I think a big part of why the eyes aren't reading properly has to do with my edge of the iris. And again, this is probably how we would approach this in oil, is to blur across. when needed. In me, and you'll see in our world. Okay. Is the angry eyebrow too angry? Yes, certainly is. Let's get in here and unangrify it. But where and how? You can't just willy-nilly blur it down. Where exactly does that edge need to be softened? Let's zoom out and see if that worked. No. It's better, but we still need to get in here. Pardon me. Now, look at the mess of highlight under the eye here. Always when you're painting, you should be looking at things that are just like, that you've left in a lazy, distracting. I've left a distracting mess under the eye on the right. And how do we solve it? Well, you've got to look at nature, the photograph, and look at the painting, and you find out what directionals are missing. So really tough, really critical. I mean, this is the stuff that where it counts. The rubber meets the road here. You can see the big difference between like, look here, there's little highlights here that I never quite got. And even still, we're probably going to need to layer this over. But here's our little. And this is in a way, again, where it's fun, but dangerous, because you can start to get into like being too beholden to a photographic result. I think I screwed up that ear. Oh, God. Oh, boy. Here. Let's find it. There, here we go. We never did this stuff, and I might have left it blank. All right. So, also noteworthy is just this, all this stuff along here that you have to solve. You have to blur these edges, even though you might not know exactly where or how they blur. They have to be blurred. Then you can zoom out and see, is that right? Is it wrong? I'm kind of happy with everything else. And now we're just looking for expression stuff. Like, where are the highlights under the nose? Like, let's plow this in here a bit. I see where it is in the painting. I'm going to bring it across here a bit. Okay. And it also needs to kind of it needs to be determined where the edge of this is to be determined, right? Where is the edge of that nose? How far over does this highlight go? Can I blur this edge so that our gray, you're almost like you're blurring things, but yeah, if you blur too much, you're going to lose that structure that you want. Okay, come on. Is the bag under the eye too much there? Probably. Probably. So we need to solve it. I think I carved up too much. But really, this is the part of the thing that's where it's like you're all guns are out, and you're just kind of like, you lose that, you kind of lose it a little bit, because any plan that you had for organization goes out the window. You're like, I'm just going to try everything and mush things around until it feels better. And that is fun, but again, slightly unnerving. All right. This is why I don't paint. I'd be adjusting forever. And let me tell you, that's, the stream helps with that tremendously, because I know that it doesn't look different in the time lapse. Like, again, it's like, it's like we're going on, and it's never really going to end. It can't. But by having this kind of like goal of a time lapse, and the hope that people will see that I can do it, like people watching. So it's like, can I do it? I don't know. But I think, believe me, I'm with you. And there's no reason in a studio to put a deadline on yourself, because you're like, who else are they going to get to paint the portrait at this time? Like, they're going to buy this thing, so I can make it perfect. But, that may be sort of like, listen, I mean, my sentiments exactly. Like, you just be adjusting and tweaking until the cows come home. And that's where this stream somewhat helps me to organize things in a way where it's like, you've got to finish this. It's got to be done, because I want that next video. I want to finish the time lapse on the next one. I don't want to do another 3 hours on this one. Whoa. But yeah. No, thanks for your feeling my pain here. All right. Let's drag this color through. So the more you drag this color in, you also have to watch out that it's blurring. It is blurring and blending with the rest. So now look at the corner of the eye on the left. That's getting too. Do you see a bit of the what's his name, Al Pacino coming through? I don't know why I get that vibe, but it's. You gotta stick some color there. Come with me. All right. What else do we have in this world of pure imagination? Under the chin, there's certainly we've got to find a way to bring this shadow edge through without muddying the waters. Same with this one. Bring it back and through. Oh boy. Okay, not horrible, but not great. Blur this edge somewhat better. Okay, look, little white speckles here in the corner might make it look like an oil painting more, but let's not do that. Let's finish the canvas, particularly there. All right, we're coming through here with guns blazing. Nope. I peeled that in too far. So there, we've rounded that edge, but we've also gotten ourselves into a bit of a pickle there, because what else do we have to round? You know, it's like Zeldavania. That's kind of another way of saying what you're saying. Like, the more you do, the more it opens up things you haven't done. And that's, if you leave it broad, then nobody can say, that part looks funny. Like, if it's very broad, where's the more refined it gets, the more you can say, like, it's like that story when I was painting a copy in the Met. Oh, what's that? Why is that there? Look at this. Sometimes this happens. Okay, well, I was painting a copy of a painting in the Met, and somebody was watching me paint, and the man turned to his wife and said, he forgot the button. Just screw up everything equally. You got it. And that's the best you can do, because it is. That's what I do too. Try to equally screw everything up. And then eventually what I used to do, and I still do it on a micro level, is I'd walk away from it because I'd be like, ugh, I have to go screw that up again. I don't want to do that. And I'd leave my studio for weeks, sometimes months. And then I would come back into the studio and see this painting and say, this is like done. Like, can we not screw it up anymore? And you just sort of say, that's the end. And that's not the best way to do it. You should actually not waste yours and everyone else's time. I think, but it's very tempting to work that way because, you know, you're an artist. You're brooding over, ruminating even when you're not working. And then eventually you sort of say, you know what? Let's let ourselves off the hook. Or not. All right. How's that? I'm not done, but I'm just saying like look at the nose, the highlight on the nose. We want the eyes on the left to have those dreamy blues as well. So let's do our Zeldavania method. I wouldn't complain about what? Oh, thanks. Oh, yeah, I'm happy with it. I just want to I want to give myself, I don't want to just let myself off the hook, which I usually do. I just say like, okay, that's good enough at, in the size of your cell phone or whatever. Like, I know what's different. Thank you. Yes. 301. Oh God. Zeldavania, you're getting into my head here now. By the way, it's time for lunch. Jeez, yeah. No, I know. I know it. Oh, but I can't. Mike. Is Mike okay? Here, that'll soften that eye up a little bit. Maybe too much. All right, we're going to do our merge layers. Yeah, this is the point in the show where I'm like, if I don't stop now, I have to then double down and like get lost in the sauce again, to quote a Ween lyric. I don't want to do that, but that's where this leads if you don't pull the plug now. And the reason I'm not pulling it is because I'm seeing things that I know are easy to pick off and make a meaningful difference. Like the eyeball there. The way the eyeball here comes down, and then carve this across. The eyeball here, which I never resolved. And you could see when you go this small with brushes, now you're really getting into this. The blue of the iris, the blue of, not the iris, but what's the white of the eye called? It has the right painter quality. Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. Are you saying stop now before you hang yourself? Am I ready to do it? I don't know. It's pretty good. Yeah. I'm flicking my eye back and forth for the last minute here. Yeah, it's like I'm not going to ever... The only thing that I have to say is the nose wing on the right needs to be addressed. So by that I mean this area why is it that the nose on the right here doesn't quite lift up in the right position? I could say a lot of bad things about the mouth, but that nose, you don't want to leave that like that. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm, again, overthinking. Whoops. Yeah, when you zoomed out, that stood out somehow. So, yeah, let's zoom out. It's the nose on the right, and it's the softening of all of this. So, again, like you were saying, the hat, if you fix the things around the hat, that somehow it's a double-edged sword because it opens you up to other problems. Does that make sense? Like, it shows you problems that you didn't know existed. It opens up cans of worms in a way that you didn't want to know about. So let's try to blur it. Try and get in and out of here as quick as we can. So there's a blur. We never really resolved this gulp. We never really resolved the mutton chops. Come on. How did these go across too? I'm sort of like dilly-dallying. Okay. Highlight inside the tip of the nose. I'm sorry, the highlight right along here. This is some beautiful trickling light here. Needs to be addressed. And then here, there's a highlight that lives in here. Okay. And then this one, it's like, what is it? It's like this needs to be addressed. You need that slight edge on the nose wing. And then in here, let's get rid of this somewhat, if we can. It's perilous. Like, why is this so ferocious? Why is this? I see a comment there. I don't know if I want to read the chat. I'm not going to. Yeah, okay. No, nothing on the chat. All right, Vania, help me out here. Can you let me off the hook? We got Eagle Eye Zelda Vania there, and it's true. I mean, I sincerely appreciate the feedback. I wouldn't be doing this. Oh my God. Where? Like pretending that I don't know that. Oh, no, that's just, I meant to do that. Look, like here. Great point. I don't know if this is the one you meant, but there's a whole lot of them. I mean, leaving some of these spots gray there, it's just going to have to be the way I do it. Really, we could get in here and go crazy. But we're not going to do it today. Are we? Look, corner of the mouth. Give a new layer. Lock this one. And then look at this corner of the mouth here. You can get in here. Find your paintbrush. Oh, dude, they won't let me in there. I wanted to leave that painterly because I think it's cool. But I don't. There, that kind of turns the mouth there, softens the expression somewhat. Like, what about this? Why does this have to be so dark? So it doesn't is the answer. And we can find a comparable value and just smear it across. But we're not going to do that until we merge our paint layer. God, what time is it? 11:53. Okay, that's fine. We'll stop at noon. Merge layers. Okay. Another thing I noticed was this edge. Well, hold on. Let's one thing at a time. And then this edge really should be blurred. This edge was never supposed to be that edgy. And then within the highlights, there's this whole hierarchy of what is highlight and what is shadow melting in. I mean, that's the kind of thing that really drags you into the mud, literally, because you then start having to deal with edges that you hadn't dealt with for a long time. You begin to see where things went awry. The way the nose on the left blurs is suspicious to me. So how come the original face is a slightly warmer glow? Is that a limitation of the paint colors? Warmer meaning meaning what? Oh, are you talking about the red on the edge of the nose? I don't know if I'm sort of seeing that. Like this kind of red. Sorry, if you come to this point, isn't it best to come back next time and get a fresh perspective? Now, wait a minute. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that I have it in some places. Here, look, like something like that, but it's like a darker red. So what happens is I never quite convinced myself that I was wrong about the color, even though I knew I was. We can blur those in. So yeah, you mean if you come to this point and you want to keep going, like, don't call it today? Like, you mean keep going? Like, because the question is, you could leave it. I could just leave it like this, but then would I always want to go back and fix it? I mean, it's really a matter of like look at how like fickle I could be. It's like, well, I feel like it's okay until somebody starts to call me out. Like, look, I just did something there which is not going to be. I like sharpened the nose. I don't know, man. I think these are the questions that drive a painter nuts. Knowing when to finish it. I have a teacher, my teacher has been working on a painting for like the better part of 30 years. It's still in his studio. And he constantly has people coming in, you know, and that's nutty because you get into, you start really going crazy if you do that. Okay, we're gonna. Your next comment, I think it looks great. You keep doubting it. No, but what? Of course, I'm also reading into your commentary with my own projections. So you said if you come to this point, isn't it best to come back next time and get a fresh perspective? Say more about that, because like always that could be true. The question is, if I start a stream, I don't know. Tell me more about that, because I think that's at the heart of the issue. You can always find that breaking point where you're like, nah, like look at this stuff. Why is this so sharp? Why didn't I blur those edges more? You will always look back at the painting and say, that edge could have been sharpened. Or this little dark, you didn't address it. So here, if I zoom all the way out, then you can start to see. This is something that I do a lot of. Getting lost in the woods too much. Totally. I don't think so. Oh, you mean, I get what you're saying. If you know there's stuff to change and you're not just getting tangled up, then just come back and do it when you're fresh. And part of that is my the stubbornness. Yeah, it does. It'll look good. It'll look good. I think it'll be good. There's the stubbornness of wanting to get it done and not have to make it bleed over. So here, let me say something about this that's huge. This is a big part of painting that happens to people, and it's very interesting. If you look at my bridge of nose, like my bridge of nose is like the nose comes out like this, like, and my eyes, the corner of my eyes come together like this. Now look at my painting. Do you notice something about the bridge of the nose? So often painters paint themselves. They're just like, you can't get away from it. You're so used to seeing yourself, especially if you're like, have that narcissistic bent where you're like, that's part of like being an artist in some cases. It's like the way you look at the world is like the most, it's like you get into it, right? And you start to project your own physiognomy on other people. It happens all the time. Like I've seen many, many painters from my painting school who do the same thing. You can spot their paintings a mile away because they just have the kind of flavor. Now, when you're working from a photo, it's easier to not fall into that trap because the photo doesn't lie. But you can get away with errors more when you're painting from life. But even still, like you can see, the way that bridge of the nose just pops in there in the corner, that's me. You can look at so many of my paintings and see the same thing. So that's one thing I want to clean up before the end. So how do we do that? Well, you got to do it gently and strategically, and don't pull it out too much. And yeah, like here, all this is the inability for me to see that here along this edge, where are we going to pull it from? You pull it from there. I'm refusing to see that this edge has light moving into it. Now, did I just go too far? Probably, yes. But never fear. You coax it back. You kind of have to be willing to jump over that edge and say, if I go too far, I can drag it back. When you begin the journey as a painter, you're so precious about it because you're like, oh, if I do that, then I'm going to have to repaint it if I don't get it right. Not the sooner you learn that that's not a big deal, the better. Okay, let's get this highlight. It's too distracting. Let's blur this edge up and in. And then that's pretty good. Feel good about that. Now this way. Blur this one in this way. And then this one like that. Oh my God. Okay. Eye on the right. I mean, I've got problems with that. I've got problems with the way he's got kind of this raccoon eye thing going on here now. Now he's really going to have the raccoon eye. Is he? Yep. He's gonna. Dark edge here. Let's pull it up, across. Filter this thing up and through here. So it's kind of like this edge here where the brown bleeds up and through. And then this edge it should be blurred. Gosh almighty. Now, seriously, it's like a lot of it I'm making up, Vania, because you're saying it's great, like whatever, like you do you. But it's like a spotter. It's like let's push it, let's do it. So I appreciate, even if that's not what you're saying, I'm certainly projecting onto our conversation the need to advance. And it's really helpful. It's invaluable because a big part of this is like growing, and you're never really going to grow as a painter unless you push yourself. So much appreciated. Better. I think we're going to jump the shark here if we don't be careful. But look. Let's find this nose, how the nose, that aquiline Gene Wilder nose coming down here. It's looking painterly, I would say. I think that's kind of okay. And then the last thing that I would do is do a glaze. So here, we're going to put in this. We're going to lock this layer. And then in our new layer, we're actually going to glaze a dark value. By glazing, what I mean is you take your color and let's find what our color is really. We'll see if this will work. So there's our color. And then in our new layer, we're going to make it a nice bold dark blue. And then with our paintbrush, watch this. If you're still with us, this is going to show the beauty of, wait, where's our tools? We need to get our, you want your opacity. No, sorry. View full screen mode. Okay, so check it out. If you're still with us, we're going to grab this layer. We're going to make it 25% opacity. And one day I hope to be able to show this in the studio. You're glazing that color down. See? It's a blue that you can do this in the studio with paint that's not thick. Does that make sense? It's really a beautiful medium when you know how to use it. And, same thing here. I'll put a glaze across there. Put a glaze through here. And then the last thing I would do before closing up shop, let's just glaze this down because I like having the highlight nature of it. All right. Do I like that? No. Okay, what we're going to do is bring the opacity. We're going to merge that with this. Merge layers. So by taking a saturated color and putting in oil, making it really oily, and then laying that oil over the surface of something that's too bright, you can glaze it down, darken it down without it having to go too dark, basically. So, well, with that said, I'm going to zoom right in here and find out what's what. I think we're back to normal opacity. We're painting normally. We're gonna carve this edge in. And now that we have the right color, we can begin to make slight changes to the shape of the lapel. Okay. And I loved what happened there with the glaze. So I might do that again. And that's our last. Wait a minute. What's this? Oh, that's the drawing layer. So we're going to lock this layer, put in another glaze, and then we're going to grab a nice bright color like that. And then in our color picker, we're going to again do this, and then in the layer, we'll take the opacity down to 25%. Let's call it 25, and then get our brush and knock it in again. I don't know. Not dark enough. Let's go. LFG. That's too bright. I'm not going to let that happen. No, not what we're going for. Anyway, it worked the first time, but not the second. So here, we're going to paint in here at 100%, and we're going to paint over the top. Are we going to see this in the time lapse? Definitely. It's going to be brutal. Sorry. I see what's happening here. Well, that just goes to show what happens. Merge layers. What the heck? Anyway, team, merge visible, merge layers. Thank you for standing by, and I'm gonna get a dark value here and close things out with a scumble. Yet again, thank you, and appreciate the GG. I think we got it. Okay, let's stop our time lapse, and then we can watch the rest together. What I think I'm going to do is, so here's our start. The background just got smeared in. But look, yeah, the head came to right quick. You know? I don't know. I'm proud of that. I think it went through, we went through heck, but we did it. Thanks for your help, and I'm gonna look for the time lapse later. I'm gonna put this one in our file, and yep, zoom out, zoom in. We're good. I think we can hang our hats on that one, so to speak. All right. Again, can't do it without you guys hanging in there with me, and more to come. Who's next? I don't know, but it probably won't be tomorrow because I'm traveling for the weekend. And have a good holiday weekend if you're having one, and so long.